This is Akashvani. In the program Money Talk, now we bring you a discussion on Israel Palestine conflict and its implications on global crude oil prices. The participants are A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Anubha Rohtagi, anchor.
Global oil prices have seen a sudden surge following the conflict between Israel and Palestine. To discuss the implications of this surge in price and its impact, I am now joined by economic analyst Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya. Mr. Bhattacharya, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
After a fall in international crude oil prices in the past weeks, we are now seeing a sudden spike due to the Israel-Palestine conflict that began over the weekend. Now, crude prices have jumped around 3% and are nearing the $90 mark right now. What are the immediate implications of this spike in oil prices for the world and for India?
Well, the implications for both the world as well as India are not very good, because if oil prices surge, and as you know, there are only a few countries which are producing crude oil, the prices of both Brent crude as well as the West Texas crude will go up. But you need to see this rise in crude oil prices in the larger context of what is happening in the world. This increase of 3 to 4% increase that you have seen in the Brent crude oil in the last couple of days is actually what is called a risk premium. In a sense that when the oil market participants see that a war is taking place and it potentially can escalate, as we all fear, the oil prices go up. Now, this has nothing to do with the actual demand and supply situation. It has to do more with the perception of global uncertainty. So when such a situation emerges, we are always seen that the crude oil prices go through this kind of increases, and as I said, they call the risk premium. From India's point of view, India is dependent on crude oil imports to the tune of 85% of our total domestic requirements. So therefore, we will be worried. And as you know that as long as the crude oil prices, particularly the Brent crude, remain below 90, the Indian finances, the government finances, were by and large taken care of. But now that they are threatening to breach the $90 per barrel mark, it will be something that both the governments as well as the oil companies, whose prices, even though on paper, are free, but they will always be little restrained in passing on the increases in prices, particularly at a time when India is going into an election season. So the challenges arising out of what is happening in the Brent crude price is arising not just from an economic point of view, but also from the political point of view.
The conflict is happening in a region that you just now said it is home to many of the world's top oil producers. And like you just said, that so far the oil price movement has been driven by increased geopolitical risk rather than any real impact on supply. However, given the relations between the countries in the region, if other countries are drawn in this conflict, do you see crude oil prices touching $100 a barrel as is being predicted by some analysts?
Well, putting a figure to this will be a little difficult at this point in time. But what we can safely say at this stage is that a lot depends on the way the situation in West Asia develops. If the Israeli counterattack to the Hamas attack or terrorist attack to Israeli and the Gaza Strip and everything, it escalates into a full-scale war in that region with Lebanon being brought in and Iran joining. If that kind of a situation emerges, even $100 per barrel will be in underestimation. But I don't think we can make any safe prediction at this point in time when Israeli reaction is still to be judged. And the negotiations between Hamas and Israeli authorities are going on. In what way the hostages can be released from the Hamas capture. So I think this is a very difficult time, particularly for the oil sector and particularly for the Indian oil sector companies and of course the government. But we have to wait and watch in what way this crisis, whether it escalates or it remains static at this point.
Along with this particular crisis that has erupted over the weekend, now oil prices were already witnessing volatility since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war last year. And some time ago, the OPEC Plus grouping decided to keep the current oil production cuts in effect until the end of this year. In fact, today morning we saw that the Dutch and British wholesale gas prices rose on concerns over supply. Is this likely to further aggravate an already volatile price situation?
Russia is a big oil supplier, and probably after this crisis in West Asia, you will see the Russian Urals coming in larger quantities into the market. Also remember that Saudi Arabia, which is one of the largest producers of crude oil, they are in very, very good relations till recently with Israel. One of the reasons why the attacks took place is believed to be that Iran was not very happy with the way the Arab unity, world unity, was being challenged by Israeli maneuvers or forays. So I don't see that the oil market will further aggravate because what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, but certainly it is one dimension which we must not overlook, which is what happens to Indian oil companies. Indian oil companies had just begun recovering, and as you saw in the first quarter results, they were doing well. And the second quarter result, which will be out very soon, they may suffer because of the lack of adequate price recovery after their cost of importing has gone up. So from a domestic oil company's point of view, this is also something that you must watch it very closely and carefully.
Talking about India, now India is world's third largest crude oil importer. And our Union Oil Minister Hardeep Singh Puri yesterday said that such kind of uncertainties and events, he was referring of course to the Israel Palestine conflict, he said that these events only encourage people to look for alternate sustainable ways. In this context, how significant is India's focus on transitioning to cleaner, greener fuels?
Very important, but these will yield results not immediately. These are actions, strategies, and policies that will give us an alternative reliance to renewable fuels, which will reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. As of now, it seems that our own strategic crude oil reserves, which are just at around 39 million barrels, which is good enough for about 7.5 days of India's crude oil requirement. So from that point of view, the current situation is not something that is alarming, but something that we must keep a close eye on. Yes, the push to renewable will help us overcome such situations, but that will not happen immediately. That will take place. The benefits of this will come over a period of time, maybe a year and a year and a half or 2 years later.
Right. It may take some time, and like we just discussed, that the government is putting a lot of focus on greener fuels, on developing greener fuels, on developing clean fuels. So what, in your opinion, needs to be done? What more needs to be done to lessen our dependence on fossil fuels and, to move towards cleaner, greener fuels?
There are two immediate steps that are required. I think India's domestic fossil fuel production has seen a steady decline over the last many years. We have not succeeded in ensuring that our domestic oil exploration and licensing to get more participants in this game, and we can produce more domestically. Remember that even though we need to move towards alternative fuels and green energy over a period of time, there is a period of transition. And during this transition, we'll continue to be dependent on fossil fuels. So therefore, it will not be wise to completely give up our plans and exploration in fossil fuel basins. And we need to invest in increasing our domestic oil production so that our vulnerability to such global shocks is less. Number two, we must ensure that we put in place a proper fiscal incentive structure by which producers as well as users can switch over to more renewable energy and green energy sources.
When the world economy is still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and rising inflation is causing worry to central banks everywhere, rising oil prices are a bad sign for inflation, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm glad you have raised this issue because it will essentially mean that the management of retail prices will become a slightly more onerous task for the Reserve Bank of India, which just now concluded its bi-monthly monetary policy review. There, it had underlined the dangers and the concerns over both food and fuel prices, which actually constitute a lot of our retail price index. So, therefore, the expectation that probably the Reserve Bank of India will be able to bring down the repo rate or the interest rate over the next few months, if these oil prices continue to behave and move northwards as they are now threatening to do, my fear is that the Reserve Bank of India's management of the monetary policy to further growth and at the same time control and retain the price lines will be a little more challenging. It will also be challenging for the government to manage its fiscal consolidation program because remember, subsidies are an important element in our energy basket, and those subsidy bill will probably will have to be increased, and that will mean pressure on government finances. So both from a price point of view as well as from a fiscal consolidation point of view, these developments need to be watched and monitored very closely.
Talking about RBI, what about the US Fed? Because volatile oil prices cloud the outlook for inflation, and that also puts the US Federal Reserve in a position to keep monetary policy tight.
The US is in a slightly different situation. The US is facing not so much problem because they rely more on the WTU crude, West Texas crude, and they have their own reserves. And so I don't see the US will be that badly affected by the current round of developments in West Asia. Their challenges are slightly different. Their job numbers have shown that they are actually have to probably go in for a further rate hike to cool down the economy. So therefore, the US is right now is in a different situation. Their bond yields are going up. As a result, a lot of money is going out of India and being invested in the US market. That is a different kind of a challenge the Indian markets will have to face. But as far as the oil is concerned, this will not have a direct and immediate impact on the US economy as much as it will have on the economies that are dependent on imports and foreign supplies.
You just spoke about the markets. So the tensions in the Middle East have implications beyond oil prices. As we can see the impact on global markets as well. Just yesterday, we saw the Sensex losing more than 480 points. Although today, of course, it has surged more than 550 points and more than make up for it. And the impact is also being seen on gold prices as well. So at this point of time, it is becoming a very difficult choice for the investors also. And how do you see the world markets and the global markets in this scenario?
I think they will remain volatile. Markets cannot but remain volatile at a time when such developments taking place. At one level, you are seeing the Russia-Ukraine war. It is not nowhere being resolved. The Israel and Palestinian issue is just a new problem that the world has to face. The US economy is still not out of the woods. So therefore, in such a situation, and the Chinese recovery that was expected has not taken place. So in such a situation, the world markets will remain in turmoil and volatility is something that is assured.
What about the impact on gold prices?
Well, the gold prices, to my mind, in such a situation will see some sort of appreciation because when the stock markets and the commodity markets particularly see some volatility of this nature, gold investment becomes a kind of a safe area, and which is why a lot of money goes into gold, and therefore one can expect gold prices to appreciate a bit.
Thank you so much for speaking with us, Mr. Bhattacharya.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on Israel-Palestine conflict and its implications on global crude oil prices. The participants were A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Anubha Rohtagi, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our